Mayor Adams calling for changes to sanctuary city laws. He says the policies are, quote, a detriment to public safety. The mayor says it should be easier to deport migrants who are accused of committing crimes, and he wants better communication now with ICE. So at the end of last week, on Thursday morning, I sat down with New York City ICE Director Genalo, who went on the record. Director Genalo is joining me now. So great to have you here on Picks and Politics for your first appearance.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So let me talk to you about this because there's been a lot of talk about ICE involving the migrant crisis. In fact, just this week, Mayor Eric Adams was calling for more communication with ICE. So what exactly would that look like if it did happen?
Well, as I've been stating in the past and in prior press conferences, is ICRO, we're here to help. We want to help. We have overarching priorities, the same as the city does, the mayor's office in NYPD, and it all involves public safety. So obviously, prior to the sanctuary policies, we had a great collaboration where individuals that were arrested by NYPD, we were notified, and if they went and were remanded into custody, we were able to drop detainers, and they honored the detainers.
Okay, so let me stop right there and go to what you're actually allowed to do right now with the sanctuary laws and why the mayor is calling for a change.
Well, basically, we still do on the federal level what we've always done. And that's if we have knowledge of an individual that's being arrested and being remanded into local custody, we'll lodge an ICE detainer, which is accompanied by an administrative warrant that's signed off by a manager for ICE. At that time, obviously due to the sanctuary policies right now, the detainers are not honored and the individuals are released right back into the community.
Okay, so what some are saying right now is when you're seeing things play out on the street, there's been a lot of high-profile migrant asylum seeker crime, right? There was the attack on the NYPD officer, there's been a number of slashings, robberies, and so on and so forth. Many are saying before ICE gets involved, let the due process play out, let them go to court, and then could play out the idea of deportation depending on a verdict. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, this is what happens. If someone comes into local custody, say, well, NYPD, and they arrest the individual, and they're being remanded and they're being prosecuted by one of the district attorney's offices, most of the times they're going to either be released on their own recognizance, they'll get bail, and then they'll be released back into the community, and the hearings can go on for a long time. If the individual is foreign-born and is amenable to removal proceedings from the United States, if they turn them into our custody, over to our custody, they would be detained in ICE custody. The removal process would start, but everyone has the same process as a regular criminal hearing.
Meaning they're in your custody,
yep,
but could also then go back to a courthouse if they need to for their court date.
Right. Basically, they're going to go through their removal hearings in front of an immigration judge, but if the local jurisdictions, the law enforcement agency, wishes to continue with their prosecution, they can then contact us. They provide us with a writ, and the writ allows us to transfer the custody of the individual from ICE custody back to the law enforcement agency to continue their prosecution. At that time, they could remand them into their own custody, or they could bring them back to our custody. Either way, they can't release the individual once we allow them to take custody.
Okay, and it's a complicated, convoluted process when you hear it all, right? And that's why there's so much communication between agencies. What are your thoughts on sanctuary city policies, and what does it prohibit you from doing?
Well, basically, the sanctuary city policies that are in place just took away all the cooperation that we had with all of our law enforcement partners. So they're not honoring our detainers. They're not contacting us if a foreign-born individual is arrested that would be amenable to removal proceedings. So these individuals, once they are released back into the city, we have to then go and find them. And obviously, it's a timely issue. You have to backtrack, as they can be transient, they could be moving, they could go out of state. We're behind the 8 ball.
Let me be clear, because some are saying deport, depending on if somebody's arrested before the due process plays out. So, for example, the individual who's arrested for the incident in Times Square against the police officer, that person could then just be deported if ICE were involved. But you're saying that's not necessarily the case.
No, that's not true. I mean, if the individual's turned over to our custody, into ICE custody, while we're working through the removal process, we would contact the local law enforcement agencies that are continuing with their own prosecution and ask them, do you want to continue with the prosecution and see it to completion. Because in ICRO, we want to see the cases go to completion and get a conviction. A lot of the cases, there's so many with the different prosecutors throughout the country and in the state. If it's not a major case, they'd rather just have the individual go through with their removal.
So currently, if an asylum seeker is arrested and NYPD makes that arrest, are they contacting you?
No.
And that's because of the sanctuary city policy?
Correct.
So if that was lifted, they would then be in communication with you to get ICE involved?
That's correct.
Okay, so without laws changing, the city council, I spoke to them, said they're not changing the law, right? That's what the mayor wants. It's not happening. So what can be done?
Well, we have to try and set up some type of collaboration with the mayor's office and even the governor's office in the state, where maybe we could change some of those sanctuary policies to at least include individuals that have committed some very violent crimes.
Let me talk to you about this, because I usually keep it real, and I want to ask you a question, because I spoke to a lot of elected officials who said that because of ICE and the reputation of ICE in the past, going into schools, going into hospitals, removing people there, that ICE has a negative reputation overall, and that's why they don't want to get them back involved. How do you battle the negative reputation that ICE has from previous experiences to where we are today?
Okay, well, first of all, ICE has internal policies, and we never go into schools or hospitals. And in my career, which spans almost 32 years, none of my staff has ever gone into schools or hospitals.
But you're aware of the reputation,
yes,
right?
It's unfortunate. There's the narrative that's out there. ICE does not arrest victims. ICE does not arrest witnesses. We're out in the field doing targeted enforcement. So you'll hear ICE is out doing these sweeps or raids. Cannot be farther from the truth. Basically, my staff knows the exact person they're going after before they go out into the field. They investigate the case. Then we go to our legal department to get legal sufficiency. Once it's signed off by the legal department, it goes back to the case officer's manager, the supervisor, who then signs off on the case. So it's a triple check.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because I think some think that if sanctuary city policy were to change at all, ICE would come in, swoop in, and then there would be a ton of people that were removed.
No, like I said, New York, unfortunately, we have a plethora of criminal non-citizens here. So we focus and prioritize all our resources on the ones that have committed the worst crimes. We're not going after the people that are here searching for a better life, the families. That's not what ICE does, and unfortunately, it gets portrayed that way sometimes, and it's just a narrative that's pushed that's not incorrect.
Okay, I want to keep this conversation going. We're out of time today, but I think this is an important conversation to keep going as the conversations change and shift. We'll see how it all plays out, but you're welcome back anytime, okay?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. ICE Director Ken Genalo.